Next up, Michelle Parry-Slater continues our series with the Charity Learning Consortium, looking at learning and development in the third sector. This month, she's talking to Peter Jones of the Stroke Association in how they've adapted through the pandemic.
Welcome to Learning Now TV. Again, we're here with our Charity Learning Consortium sponsored segment to speak to people who work in the third sector, and because they've got fantastic stories to tell that people in L&D from the private sector can actually learn from. Today, we're speaking to Peter Jones. Peter Jones from the Stroke Association. Hi, welcome to Learning Now TV. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your job?
Thank you, Michelle. So, as you said, my name is Peter Jones. I work in the Learning and Development team at the Stroke Association. We have 800 staff, approximately, and our team actually focuses mostly on internal training rather than external training. Obviously, the Stroke Association deals with people who've had stroke survivors, of which there are 1.2 million across the UK. And we're here to support them as they rebuild their lives after stroke.
Okay, so last year with COVID and all of that stuff going on, you had to obviously, like the rest of the world, change the support you give to your 800 staff. So do you want to talk us through, Peter, what sorts of things came out from the COVID response for you?
Yeah, it was a very interesting time. Actually, before COVID hit, we as a team had recognised the potential value of digital training. So prior to COVID, we'd focused mostly on face-to-face, but with 800 staff and very geographically displaced. So we had 19 offices and various other hubs and things across the country, everywhere from Southampton to Edinburgh, Wales and Northern Ireland too. So geographically, training presented a problem, not just logistically, but also in terms of expense and time as well. So we knew the value potentially of digital online training. It was just convincing other people that was the case. So it was a combination really of people being fearful of the technology and also, I guess, a preconceived idea that face-to-face training somehow had more value. So once COVID hit, actually all bets were off. It was, we're going to have to do this. So rather than slow and steady as we'd planned, it hit us all at once, basically.
It's a very familiar story across many organisations throughout not just the UK, but the world, given the pandemic. And so you're saying there you've got already your geographical reasons, you've got some drivers, but you mentioned that not everybody was on board. So what did you do around that sort of stakeholder approach?
That's a really interesting question, because the perceptions obviously were just that, perceptions. It wasn't seen as valuable. We'd spent a lot of effort in terms of face-to-face to make courses more active, more facilitated rather than passive. And I think people had this idea that if they went online, it would just be listening to somebody with a PowerPoint. So it was overcoming those sort of things. So once everybody was on board with the technology, they had to be, we looked at making the online training as close as we possibly could to replicating what we'd done to the face-to-face. So making it as active as we possibly could, as engaging as we could.
And what sorts of things were you doing to make this active? You're absolutely right. I think that there is a perception that it'll be boring, but online doesn't need to be boring. It certainly doesn't have to be, in my experience anyhow. So what did you do to make it active, as you call it?
Well, the first thing actually was naming it, a bit bizarrely. So replacing the word webinar with online training actually made a big difference. So yeah, the chat function on Skype actually helped us to encourage feedback, questions from people, and that helped them feel like they were part of it. When we developed away from Skype into other platforms, breakout rooms have been an absolute amazing thing. That enables people to replicate the discussions they would have in a training room. So they could go away in pairs or small groups, discuss, and then come back and feedback, or actually do something different in small groups as well. It's surprising. We've done coaching training, for example, which you would think could only be done face-to-face, but that has worked brilliantly online.
Perfect. So I hear what you're saying entirely, and I know that a lot of organisations have replicated this. You have done something a little bit different, though, haven't you? You've brought in that concept of gamification, and I'd love to talk to you about how's that landed for you? What does it look like?
Yeah, so gamification can take many forms. Quizzes, simple quizzes as icebreakers. We have people coming into the room. We have things published that they can interact with, like we've got Hangman, we've got Alpha Nums, name pickers, all those sort of things. But actually, whiteboards are quite a good tool as well. So being able to put post-its on and so on. But I think what you're after, Michelle, is the fact that we've started creating things for e-learning, which are more engaging, more interactive. So one example of which would be for a fraud module that we developed in-house. We had a policy on it, which was obviously quite dull material, but very important to get across. So we developed the idea of having a game, a bit like Beetle Drive. I don't know whether people are familiar with Beetle Drive, where you roll a dice against your opponents, and you have to be the first, basically, to draw a beetle. So if you roll a 6, you draw the body, roll a 1, you draw the head, and so on. Well, we adapted that to the 6 elements of the policy, and we put the dice element in, and the people were basically playing against the computer, the AI, and would be the first to try and get a jigsaw piece, and they had to be the first to get the 6 jigsaw pieces. So actually what we've discovered is we can do that for e-learning. We can actually publish that now as well and use it within our Adobe webinar platform as well. So people can use that as part of the online training as well.
Okay, so you're describing there my childhood parties of the 70s and 80s, where we had to fight for chocolate, but you're obviously here fighting for policy puzzle pieces, which is excellent news to hear. Do not people say it's a little bit childish? Where do you get off, with that kind of, isn't it a bit silly to be doing things like that? Peter, talk me through, because you've had a really great response to this gamified approach to your online learning and your e-learning. Is it childish?
That's a really good question. And yeah, there have been a few people, and it's always before they do it. So it's always when they hear about it rather than actually getting involved. I think it's like most things as an adult, isn't it? It sounds like it's something for children, maybe. So you get a preconceived idea. But actually, once people are involved in the things, particularly with quizzes and things which, again, when you're on the surface, you think these sound really childish. People throw themselves into it, get really involved, to the point where actually with that fraud module we were talking about, people actually refer to it as the jigsaw module.
Excellent. So you're really smashing through those ideas that actually gamification or fun online is not for adult learning, but actually it really is. And I know that you've got Space Invaders coming up now for your next development, which is really exciting. Peter, thank you so much for talking to us today about what you've been doing at the Stroke Association. And for you out there watching Learning Now TV, just see how simple things can really change. Better use of the chat, using quizzes, and landing people into online learning in a way that's fun. And it's great to hear if they can do it at the Stroke Association, then we can all be trying these things as well. Until next time on Learning Now TV, thanks very much.